Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome a remarkable person, Renee Schyjer. Renee is the author of the book, It's Not a Rumor. Welcome, Renee.
Hi, Lance. Thank you for having me on the show.
You're more than welcome. It's our pleasure. So, Renee, why don't we start with a little background of Freddy and yourself and what ultimately led up to the writing of this remarkable book, It's Not a Rumor.
Okay, well, Freddy was an amazing songwriter and musician, and we met a long time ago, and we just had an instant connection. We were just best friends and soulmates from the beginning. And so he took a break from music. He'd had his whole music career in the 70s and 80s. And then I kind of told him, okay, you got to get a real job. So he became a computer programmer, and he did that for a while. And then after a while, he kind of started going back to the music. But in 2006, actually, his computer programming job, they started telling him that his brain wasn't working the way it used to. And he was a genius prior to this. I mean, he could figure out any program and lots of things. He was really brilliant. And then after that, things just started getting a little strange, where he would lose the car and forget where he parked or forget his keys in the door. And after a while, I said, you've got to get an MRI. Something's wrong. Something is definitely wrong. And so what we did was, when we got the diagnosis, he had been writing a lot on Facebook and posting his stories of his life, just to try to remember them and to share them with people. And I said, you know what? We really have to write a book. We have to write the book of your life, because it's so important. And so I contacted the LA Writers Group, and because I didn't know how to write a memoir.
Sure.
And we found someone after interviewing people. We found Shannon Guyton to sit down with him and pull the stories out of him. And basically she interviewed him to get all of the stories down on paper. And my idea in the beginning of it was, he has written so many songs and the songs are very autobiographical. So I thought each one of the chapters could be a name of a song, because those are his stories. And so that's what we did. And we ultimately got that book made. And I think he would be really proud of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and you talked about how he was a musician before he went into the computer work or the data work. He wasn't just a local musician. I mean, he reached some extremely big heights through his music career, and opened for a lot of well-known bands from the 70s and 80s.
Right.
I mean, do you want to share some more on his musical talent and some of the songs that he was a part of and the groups he's worked with?
It's interesting because, he really had this passion for music from when he was 13. And he had successful bands. He's from Minneapolis, and he had successful bands in Minnesota. They had toured. They had a couple of albums they were called Skokie and the Flaming Pachucos. And he had written a lot of songs. He went to the University of Minnesota, studied music theory, and he just enjoyed it so much. And then after a while, the Skokie was doing their albums and touring and everything, and everybody kept saying, you got to go to LA. That's where it's happening. So they got all of their guys and caravanned out here, and he became really successful here. They opened for the Police. They opened for the Motels. They opened for Oingo Boingo. They they were friends with all of these guys. I mean,
Yeah.
musicians have a kinship. I don't know if it's just songwriters or musicians in general. They just have a kinship. And he played with a lot of amazing bands. They had the record for playing at the Troubadour, the Whiskey, the Roxy. These are all really big
Right.
venues here in Los Angeles. And they had a ton of fame, and they were the greatest band, but they never got that record deal. And it's sad because he would have been huge. I mean, I think his songs would be still playing today if they had gotten that record deal, but he wouldn't give up all the rights. And as you know, or a lot of people know, the music business is pretty gross in that they want to take everything. And he wasn't willing to give it up.
Sure. Sure. And I can appreciate that. Absolutely. And that's how the two of you ultimately met, right? Because
Yes.
you're from LA.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned about his job, we're fast forwarding now to where, you say he got a real job per se to pay the bills.
Right.
And, his job is noticing, you said his brain wasn't working right. Did his job notice these issues before you had ultimately noticed them? What came
Yes.
first? The job noticing these
The
issues?
job noticing. Yeah. He used to be able to, I mean, what we called it, he had an eidetic memory.
Okay.
He could remember anything somebody said, dates, figures, anything. And I think his job started noticing in 2006. I remember they were confused, like, what's going on? What's going on with you? Why is this happening? And it was a slow progression, but because he didn't actually stop working until 2010. But by 2010, he couldn't do the job anymore. He just couldn't.
So when you convinced him to go get the MRI and, see a physician, walk us through what your reaction and what your feelings were when you ultimately end up getting the diagnosis.
You know what's interesting, Lance? In the beginning, I just thought I really had no idea that this was going to be the outcome. I thought, what's going on with him? He's just not focused. And I would find myself getting mad at him, which is horrible
Right.
of me. But I was getting mad at him, like, I don't understand why are you forgetting, everything? Like, not that because I didn't put it together. And then when we finally got the MRI, and first we went to the doctor. We went to the neurologist. Now, I did have a lot of problems because I wanted to go to a specific neurologist, but he was only 60 years old. And this guy only took insurance that was Medicare.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up paying him out of pocket.
Wow.
Until he became 65 because I wanted this neurologist. And he gave him the MMSE, which is the mini mental state exam.
Right.
He didn't know the year. He didn't know the president. He didn't know a lot of things. And so that day that we went to that appointment, I was shocked. It was like a truck hit me because I didn't realize this was going to be his life.
You don't think of a 60-year-old man necessarily getting a diagnosis of dementia. And unfortunately it happens, but it's not, we always picture, the elderly and the seniors. And I think one of the difficulties, for society as a whole in these families, and I'd love to hear your opinion of this, Renee, you're looking at him and he looks normal, right? So that, it's kind of, it plays a little trick on us, right? Because they look fine, but it's once you get past the looks and get into the cognitive and the remembering and the memory, that's when you start saying, okay, but they're not acting fine, right?
And I think also that people are good at faking it.
Yeah.
I mean, he would say things, oh, yeah, sure, I got that. Oh, yeah, sure, I remember. He was great at faking it. Maybe because he was a performer, he was good at putting it on and just acting like everything was fine. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have anything wrong with me. And it's part of the denial that I had, and I'm sure he had too. But we went for a PET scan. This was before they had the amyloid PET scan. The technology wasn't there yet,
Right.
to prove the Alzheimer's. But we went for a PET scan or an MRI, and he was claustrophobic, by the way. And I don't know if you know what it's like when they put you in that thing. That piece is here, and your head is completely in there.
I like saying it's almost like putting a person through a drinking straw. You just go right in. Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Well, he's very claustrophobic. He was very claustrophobic. And so what we did, I stayed in the room with him, in the MRI machine with him, touching his legs. And I wore headphones because it's so loud.
Right.
But we put a little mirror on his eyes so he could see me and I could see him. And I was just looking at him like, everything's okay. And I would touch his legs and I would just say, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And he got through it. It was 45 minutes of torture for him.
Sure.
And that was just one of many to come.
Right.
So anyway, from that MRI, also that MRI was not covered. So I was also out of pocket for that. But I did negotiate with the imaging place to pay cash and stuff. Later, we got the amyloid PET scan, which was covered by the state of California. I don't know if people know this, but if you do have Alzheimer's, they will do an amyloid PET scan, and it is covered.
Yeah.
So the appointment was devastating. And I remember I thought I would go back to work, and I couldn't. And I couldn't, and he couldn't, and we just cried. We just cried and cried. And then every appointment, even after that, was kind of like a truck hit me, because every time we went, it was, here's what we're going to try. And I had to change my whole life.
Right. And ultimately, how, from the time you met and started dating to the marriage, and then ultimately and sadly to Rick's passing, or Freddy's passing, because I want to mention his stage name is Rick as well.
Right.
How long were you guys together?
We were together 35 years.
Wow. Long time.
He's my only boyfriend, my only husband, my only everything. Wow. I lucked out with meeting that person when I was 17, and it was the best.
A long time.
It is.
Well, and I think it's also a testament to the love that you each shared for each other too. Because that, unfortunately, in society today, that's not always the case. We do have those, fairy tale love stories, but, and that really brings to the forefront the for better or worse part of marriage. Mm-hmm. What did you do? You've already mentioned, you had to essentially stop working to be with them and to help care for him. How did you also find ways to help him? Because I'm assuming you didn't have an extensive background in medical or healthcare, or even as a caregiver. What was that like for you, being the one there caring for him in this, time of his need?
It's interesting because people always say, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did it. When you're put into that, just like a parent, you're thrown into a situation. You don't have a manual, but you just do whatever you have to do. You step up to whatever that is. I tried to work on him by making him the healthiest body he could be, and hopefully that would transfer to the brain. But he had type 2 diabetes. Okay, so unfortunately, when he became sedentary after becoming, he was a rocker and jumping around and exercising 24/7. When he became a computer programmer, he was at a sedentary job, and he sat and he ate and he snacked all day, and they provide all these snacks. He got to over 220 pounds or something, and he developed type 2 diabetes. Well, one of the things our neurologist told me was 50% of people with type 2 diabetes get Alzheimer's or dementia. And that's due to the whole insulin resistance factor. I mean, sometimes they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes or type 4 diabetes if you have insulin resistance. So that's what he had. So my mission was, I'm going to reverse this type 2 diabetes. He got on a plan, no carbs, no sugar, organic, exercise, healthy. We got a personal trainer. I got him on only healthy foods. I bought all these cookbooks, Healthy Cooking for the Mind. He went gluten-free, everything.
Wow.
I mean, it was like anything I could do, I was going to throw at it, and we were going to stop this.
Yeah.
And of course, it didn't work, but I tried. I couldn't not try.
Well, you say it didn't work, and obviously, there is no known cure, unfortunately, at this time for dementia. But do you think it helped?
It did help. In the beginning, it did help.
Yeah.
I mean, he was on a lot of supplements. He was on a lot of fish oil, a lot of turmeric, a lot of olive oil, coconut oil, all kinds of things. I remember he couldn't swallow, he didn't like swallowing the olive oil or the coconut oil. So I would fill these capsules with the oil.
Oh, wow.
And he had to take like 6 capsules a day just to get those good fats, to get him into ketosis and to try to, get the body burning fat instead of sugar.
Sure.
So it was hard, but all the things I did with him, I tried to be as supportive and helpful as I could. And it did help a little bit. I mean, going into 2016, he was actually getting better. There were things happening, like he was getting good. He was getting so much better at the MMSC with the exercise and the diet and the supplements and everything, and writing the book, because he was having to recall those memories. And yes, it was painful because he would cry during some of these stories and be sad, and we would sit there and cry together and say, can you believe this is happening to me? I mean, this is so scary and so awful. But I think writing the book helped him, and all of those supplements helped him. The bad thing that happened is when you take all those supplements like fish oil, and he was also still on baby aspirin.
Okay.
It was thinning his blood. At the same time, there was plaque building up on his brain. A piece in 2016, March of 2016, a piece of the plaque hit a blood vessel in his brain. And I went out, I came back, and he was talking gibberish. And I knew something was wrong. So I immediately took him to the hospital. They figured out he had what Dr. Amos called a brain bleed, which is like a mini stroke. I don't know. Do you know?
Well, there's TIAs, which are like mini strokes, and it's a trans-ischemic attack. It mimics a temporary stroke-like symptoms, but it's not the full-blown stroke. So is that what you're meaning when you say a mini stroke, like a TIA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because he wasn't paralyzed. He was just, his brain was scrambled, and the blood that was in his brain, it just reabsorbed. They waited for it to reabsorb, and they took him off all blood thinning agents.
No more baby aspirin.
No more baby aspirin, no more fish oil, no more ginkgo biloba. I didn't even know these things did thin your blood.
Okay.
Ginger, all these things.
Right.
They do unfortunately thin your blood.
Right.
And because he had a weak blood vessel there and the plaque was hitting it, we had to take him off all of that stuff.
How, from the time you got this diagnosis, Renee, to the ultimately the passing of Freddy, how did the disease progress for you guys? When you got the diagnosis, would you say he was in the early stages, right?
Yeah.
How would you say it progressed from that diagnosis when he was in the early stages to the ultimate passing?
It was a very slow progression, but
How many years are you talking from the diagnosis to his passing?
12 years,
Oh, okay.
maybe 10.
Okay.
But he would, he forgot how to use the TV, how to use the remote. So I was going to work at times as much as I could because I had to afford everything.
Sure.
So I would leave the TV on for him. And then I would come home. I would come home a lot. I was very absent from my job, but I would try to go. And he was staying by himself. But once, and I would leave his pills out for him. I would leave food out for him. I would prep everything I could ahead of time because I noticed in the beginning he would leave the burner on the stove. He would, or leave the coffee
Wow.
on, or lock himself out. I didn't want him going out after a
Yeah.
while. He locked himself out of the house many times. He would get lost walking in our neighborhood. And he was really great. I mean, he used to be like a human map. He knew so much about geography and everything. He collected maps, he studied them.
Wow.
So, when he would get lost, even just we would do these walks, he and I together, and I would say, let's name the streets, and we would practice and practice. But what I noticed was this progression started happening, and then he couldn't be left alone after the brain bleed. And after 2016, I had to get caregivers in for the daytime when I went to work, and then he didn't like any of them. He would
Yeah.
kick them out. And he also forgot how to brush his teeth. He didn't like to shower. Like we were talking about at one time, that the shower hurt him. So I would shower with him, or I would bathe him, or, and he forgot how to wipe. And so at first I would hand him the toilet paper. And then at first he could do that. And then after a while, he didn't even know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I would do that for him. And the caregivers, he was embarrassed,
Sure.
he didn't want anybody else. He was even embarrassed with me, but it's, you do what you got to do.
Right.
And eventually it got to where he would try to eat with a knife, or eat soup with a knife or a fork, didn't know a utensil to use, and everything had to be given to him or done for him.
So when you decided to write this remarkable book of his life and, his experiences and his journey with the illness, how was he reacting to it? I know you mentioned, there's some sad times. He's kind of in disbelief, maybe some denial, but what did you find was the greatest benefit to, because you really put your heart and soul into this book. It's not a rumor. How did you, was this as much for him as it was for after he had passed and, keeping his memory alive? What is the reason behind the book?
Well, first of all, he always wanted, I thought he had an amazing life, and I thought it should be documented. He loved the idea of it as well. He read a ton of biographies
Okay.
of famous people and anybody, just anybody. He loved to read, and he wanted his story to be like a conversation with somebody. And so my hope is that we remained very true to what he wanted. The book is 90% his life story and his story. The rest of it is my part of getting the book made and doing and documenting it and preserving.
And like the epilogue is the epilogue, right?
The prologue is mine and the epilogue is Shannon's, because she got to know everything that happened. I also documented everything I was going through in a blog that I had on It's Not a Rumor, the website. And I just would tell everybody every week. And sometimes it was hard and sad, and other times it was funny because, Freddy was not a social guy. Okay. He was a loner. I don't know if you found that as similar with a lot of people who have dementia.
It varies. Yeah.
It does?
Yeah,
Okay.
it
So,
varies.
but when he became Alzheimer's, Rick, as I used to call him, he was much more social.
Right.
And it's interesting because I felt like he changed. He changed a lot, but not always for the worst. He was always the same sweet person that he always was. Um, and he depended on me a lot more, but I wanted his story to be preserved, and I wanted to get awareness out there, because part of the reason why we named the book It's Not a Rumor, that's one of the names of his songs, but also I hid it from a lot of people. All of the fans and people that knew him kept saying, where is he? What's going on? I want to see him. Can we come see him? Can we come over? And I was hiding it because I didn't want them to see him like that.
I can appreciate that. I think that's the case for a lot of people. You know, and I think it's not just necessarily with dementia, but I think it's with any real long-term illness or disability or disease. You know, I equate it to this, like, a friend of ours, his grandmother had just passed away a few years ago, and someone in the family bought the house. Now he grew up going to that house as a child and in his young adult years. Well, the family member that bought it did major renovations and updates and everything. And it's not that there's hard feelings that this person bought the house, but they don't want to ever go to that home because then it changes the memory of what it used to be like. I think that same thing applies with, people dealing with dementia and things like that, especially somebody like Freddie who has some, celebrity status. The family, they want to preserve that memory of who he was, not who he is now.
Right.
And then you have people too who say, no, I want to show off what I'm going through because if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. Right. And it makes it more real because, oh my goodness, if this person can get it, even like with, President Reagan, they
Right.
say, Alzheimer's and dementia, the same with a lot of illnesses. You could be the president of the United States. It doesn't matter. There is no,
Yeah.
there is nobody that is safe from it. It's not going to target certain groups of people based on income, race, or gender. It's non-discriminatory, like I, like to
Mhm.
say.
Yeah.
So, what is the biggest thing, Renee, that you would like people to know about your experience in Freddy's?
Um, I think having a great support system is incredibly helpful. My friends. I went to support groups. I got very involved with the Alzheimer's Association. I went through a very dark time, Lance. I really thought, what am I without him?
Well, if I can
And
jump in real quickly, Renee, because I didn't mention this, Freddie hasn't been gone that long,
right,
and he passed. And help me out here.
August 25th,
Uh,
2022.
yeah, I mean, so it's only been a few months. So I mean, this
It
is not
has.
like something that happened years ago. This is very fresh, and I really
No,
commend you for being able to even sit and talk about this so soon because it must still be very raw.
it is, but I feel good when I talk about
Yeah,
him. I feel like I'm helping. I don't know. I'm remembering him. Everyone's remembering him and his story and what an amazing person he was. I
remarkable
mean,
person.
he
Yeah,
was amazing, super smart. I would not be myself if he wasn't with me. Do you know what I mean? I
absolutely.
mean, I just wouldn't be this person at all without him.
Right. Because you guys were together for so long, I mean, 17 years old was the age you were. How did you just how would you keep the marriage fresh and, new and exciting? Like, what would be Renee's keys to a happy, successful marriage?
Well, first of all, we were best friends, and we were both curious people and interested in things. I'm interested in learning about people. He was interested. He was interested in a lot of things, and I was interested in things. So we would never run out of conversation. And it was just a ton. I mean, he loved me and I loved him, but it wasn't just the love. It was like we were inspired by each other. I think it's an intellectual curiosity that you just want to know about other people, about other things, about different cultures, about we just loved to learn and we loved being together and talking about it and sharing those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And I can only imagine how well the two of you complemented each other. It's just, I think it's very evident through the book, just through listening to you speaking, and still, so soon, carrying on and, in a way preserving his memory and his legacy. What what do you think people that have a loved one watching this or listening to this, and it may not be a spouse, it might be a parent even, how do you think you can help them navigate living with Alzheimer's or dementia? What's the best advice you could offer to them?
The best advice I learned um, was never argue, just agree. And what I found was the most helpful. I think people with dementia or Alzheimer's have an emotional memory. So if they're close to you and they know you for a long time, they're always going to know you in some way.
Right.
They do know you. And what I used to tell him when I would see he would get like a grimace on his face or he would get confused once he didn't understand anymore, is I would just say, it's all good. It's all good. Everything's good. I'm good. You're good. We're gonna be fine. And I did tell him I loved him a million times. And that's what he remembered. Towards the end, all he could say was, I love you. And that he was the best person. And he said I was the best person. So if you just agree and you also just tell that person everything's going to be all right, I think that's very helpful. And um, just to go along with it. And even if if they're talking nonsense, no matter what it is, oh, okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds really good.
Be in their reality. Yeah, be in their reality. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I know when we previously spoke, I had asked you if you remember the last time you saw, Freddie perform. Why don't you share that story? Because it wasn't a planned last time performance. It just ended up being the last performance. What was that experience like for you and for him?
Well, it was really exciting because he was turning 64. And so he was going to play the Beatles when I'm 64. And it was his birthday. So it was perfect. There was a little bit of nervousness because he was forgetting the words a little bit to a lot of the songs. And so we made a giant music stand with the words big. It was like, even just the first line, I'm hoping if the first line is remembered, then he can get through the rest. And I would be sitting in the audience like, don't forget. But it was a great performance. We packed the little club that he played. And, he did have some memory problems during the performance, but he still did great. And it was a nice memory to have, and we recorded it, and it just was a lot of fun. He got to play, which was his love. His love was being Freddy Moore and turning into that rocker. I mean, I told you in real life he was Clark Kent. On stage he was Superman.
Right.
So it was great, but it was mixed because I was nervous getting the mic set up, you have to learn everything on the fly.
Right.
So whatever it is, and I would go to the sound guy who was mixing it. He's too low. You got to turn up the volume. It was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but it sounded a little quiet. So, but I think that's what it was. And I think he would have been proud of his performance and how we did everything. I think he would be proud of it. I hope he would.
Oh, and I'm sure he would be. What, with the book being out, have you received any feedback from readers or anybody that has purchased the book that has really stood out to you, that maybe caught you by surprise or really meant a lot?
Well, I don't remember anybody famous or anything.
Oh,
But I do know that a lot of people have reviewed the book and they really like it. They enjoy it. They think there's a lot of funny stories in there too about his life. And he sure was a character in so many ways. He invented his own way of doing things. He just came up with stuff. So there's a lot of stories in the book that are super fun and interesting, and I think people could relate. I don't know. I think they could relate to him growing up and doing all these things and having a passion and a drive for something that you just always wanted to do. And our love story is very rare, like you had said. And so there's a lot of things. I mean, I am his third wife, but and he was married to somebody famous, but you know, I don't think that's I think that's the least interesting thing
sure.
about the book.
Oh, right.
But
It's a
there is a
footnote.
little part of it, in there. And I just hope people like it and enjoy it. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback. I did have an email recently about somebody interested in turning it into a movie.
I've been sitting here thinking that this sounds like a absolute book that could be turned into a movie very easily. Yeah,
I would love that, but I don't want to assume anything
sure.
or, I'm whatever. I don't know. It's just very new and interesting to hear about. I would love it.
Well, let's play 3 questions. Instead of 20 questions, we'll play 3. Who would play Renee in the movie?
I was thinking Scarlett Johansson.
Who would play Freddy?
Freddie, I don't know about this one, but I thought Jared Leto
Oh,
might be good because he's a musician and he has blue eyes and he could do the blonde hair and he's super skinny, and Freddie was super skinny. And he could do that rocker thing. Yeah,
And would this be a movie that would be more about dementia, more about your love story, or a combination of both?
a combination. I've always thought it would be a combination. I always thought it would be a movie kind of like the movie Almost Famous
okay.
because he didn't make it, but there's that whole aspect of it. And then also kind of like The Notebook,
I was
in
thinking
that
Notebook. Yeah.
my story on what was happening to him.
Sure.
And then also a story about like just overcoming, the odds. And I know he didn't last, but his story will, and I think there's a lot of good to come from it. And I'm willing to share my experiences with anybody. I would love for people to contact me and share their story.
And we're going to have all the links that you provided us right in our show notes on the screen as well for those watching. And, anything that we can do to help promote your story and Freddy's story, we're more than happy to do. And one of the last questions, because in my day job, I do case management for families all over that a lot of them are dealing with dementia like you had dealt with. But what we really got a lot of joy out of, and this was obviously pre-pandemic and COVID, we would go to these senior centers, nursing homes, these facilities that had people with dementia and memory care issues, and we'd put on concerts for them. We have a wonderful musician, just a local musician who, did weddings and, all these different events and never sought for like, high fame and things like that. They just did it as a joy and a passion, which I think makes all the difference in the world also. And you would see these people who maybe hadn't spoken in 3 weeks. And then you play a Frank Sinatra song or, a Bobby Darin or, the oldies.
Right.
And all of a sudden they're tapping their foot and they're not missing a beat. Now,
Right.
I'll let you answer this, but explain to our listeners why people with Alzheimer's or dementia, they have the ability to recite and sing songs from 40, 50, 60 years ago, but they're not able to necessarily remember who visited them, the day before. Explain that.
Well, one thing I know about Freddie is that there's a muscle memory because we would play guitar. I played guitar. He taught me how to play guitar a long time ago. So we would play his songs. For years, we were playing his songs. It was only at the end, I would say the last 2 or 3 years that he couldn't play guitar anymore. He basically forgot how, but there was a muscle memory there. And not only that, he turned into that Freddy Moore person, from Rick to Freddy Moore, when he was on stage and in front of people. So I used to take him to all the music programs that the facilities around town. There's a group here in Santa Monica called the Fifth Dementia. Remember the Fifth Dimension?
The Fifth Dimension, sure.
And they're a chorus that gets together, and they have musicians and everything, and the people love the music. Yeah. I think it's a different part of your brain. It accesses a different part of your brain.
There is a different part of your brain that stores your musical memory. And that's why, and that's hard to explain to families who don't understand the disease process or how dementia works, because again, you're not sitting like you and Rick, right? Or Freddy, you weren't researching dementia until you had to. So you wouldn't have known that, and you'd have no reason to know that. But yes, there's a portion of our brains where a person who's in the early, mid, or late stages of dementia, that's one of the last parts to go. They're able to sing, Frank Sinatra, I Did It My Way, but they can't remember if they had breakfast, because that's in your short-term memory. And the same reason people can remember, a high school they graduated from 60, 70 years ago, because that was in their long-term memory storage. And I feel that's one of the crueler aspects of the disease, is that you can remember all those things, but you don't have the ability to remember anything new. And that's the unfortunate part. And, why people need to have somebody that gets to a point with them all the time, or, have security measures put on the door so they don't wander out and think they don't live in this house because they maybe just moved there and, they were trying to get back to their house they were at for 50 years. Right. But I just think it's remarkable. I'm just so certain that, Freddy must be very proud with how you're helping to preserve his legacy and, share your story and his story, and one of love and triumph and overcoming, like you mentioned. And we're going to be putting all of the links in our show notes and on our website. And we encourage people to get this book. It's Not a Rumor, because it's a remarkable story from beginning to end. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and Freddy's with us here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, Renee. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms, or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to thank Renee Schyjer for joining us today to share her story and book, It's Not a Rumor. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.